Hey guys, welcome back to Bear Mountain Builds. I'm Zach, and today we're building an expanding planer table that is perfect for you guys with a smaller shop, because this, when it's all folded down, is 2 feet by 3 feet and it fits perfectly in a corner. But when it comes time to just start using your planer, it rolls out and it can expand out to be 8 feet long with 3 feet of infeed and 3 feet of outfeed. It makes the whole planing process way easier. That's because we have rollers on here now. Now these rollers are the same height as our planer base. So when it comes time to actually set the height of our planer, you can just put your board on your rollers and set your height. No more you're going to be jockeying to try and get the height perfect. Along with that, you guys all know that shimmy you try to do when you feed a board into your planer, and you're going to end up taking a gouge out of the top of your board, or when you're catching it and you get another gouge out the back. You don't have to worry about that anymore. With these rollers, all you have to do is just feed the board through, and it makes it so much easier. Now, when you're done with the planing, you can fold it all back down and then tuck it away back in the corner of your shop. I offer plans for this whole build that include detailed assembly instructions, material lists, and cut plans. It honestly makes the process really easy, so if you can check those out, I'll have them linked down below in the description. With that said, hit the subscribe button, and let's kick this build off with cutting up some 2x4s. Actually, before we cut up our 2x4s, I'm running them through my planer and taking a 1/16 of an inch off of each side. Now, I love planers because they can turn a cheap piece of construction lumber into something that looks pretty nice. Since we're talking about planers, let's talk about this planer. This is the DW735 Dewalt Planer. It's pretty much the best planer you ever want to get as a hobbyist, and I'm sure a lot of you guys already have this, and I love this planer. But I only have one issue with it, and that's when I want to hook up dust control. This is a 2.5 inch hose that I want to plug into the planer, and as you can tell, it doesn't fit. For years, I've always had to duct tape my hose on there, which is a huge hassle, and that's why I've gone ahead and come up with a solution. So let's pull this thing off, and let me show you. I've designed these 2.5 inch hose adapters that fit this planer perfectly. They make use of the factory mounting system that comes with the original blower. The first one is a straight version. Now this mimics the original design with the planer, so if you don't want to change anything, you just want to be able to hook up a 2.5 inch hose, it works great. But I've also developed a 90-degree elbow version. And this gets the hose out of the way completely, so you won't have your hose running into any lumber as it's coming through. Along with that, these also have a lip on here, so you can either clip your 2.5 inch hose on or just do friction fit. So if you have this planer or you're thinking about getting one and you don't want to deal with hoses that don't fit anymore, I'll have these linked down below in the video description so you can check them out. Now let's get back to the build. With our 2x4s planed, it's time to cut out our frame. Now I'm not going to go too deep into dimensions for this video, but you can find everything you'll need in the plans. Just like that, we have all of our pieces for our frame cut out, ready to go. Now I have all these dimensions in the plans, so you can check them out down below. So from here, it's time to put our frame together. Now we're doing our tried and true lap joints. They're really strong and super easy to put together, and all of that load transfers through our wood, not through any hardware. So we can take a lot of weight, but honestly, it's a planer. You don't really need to take that much weight. So with that, let's get these things glued and screwed together. I cut out some spacers to help center the lap joints on either end of the leg, and I'm running 2.5 inch screws through the long boards so that the screw heads won't show on the outside. With the legs assembled, the rest of the frame goes together easily using my 90-degree corner clamps to keep everything square. Now that both of the side frames are assembled, I'm adding some pocket holes to my cross pieces, then connecting the two halves. All right, our frame is all put together. It is, of course, rock solid. Now, in my shop, I want all of my work surface to be the same height. That way I can use them all together. So I have my modular workbenches, my assembly table, my in-feed, out-feed table for my table saw. Everything is the same height. Now, in the case of this planer, I don't want the actual surface of the table to be the same height as everything else. I want the platform of my planer to be the same as everything else. That way, if I'm gonna run a really long board through, like a 12, 14, 16 footer, I can add my modular workbenches to the beginning and the end, so that way I can support all that length of board. So this frame is just a little bit shorter. That way, my planer platform is going to be even with my modular workbenches, and that's all in the plans, obviously. Now, with that said, it's time to go give this a black paint job so it matches everything else in the shop, and we're gonna go ahead and cut out our 3/4 inch plywood for the platforms. I'm applying 3 coats of Rust-Oleum satin black, and while that dries, I'm moving on to cutting up my 3/4 inch sheet of plywood. I'm using birch veneer plywood because I really love the look of the grain after you apply poly, but I know this is overkill for a shop build, so feel free to use whatever type of plywood you want. Since this is birch veneer plywood, I'm intentionally cutting this so that the grain will match across all 3 sections of the top of the table. To make things easy, I'm cutting out a simple corner trace to mark the cutouts for the legs on the base platform. Usually I'd be cutting out these notches with my cordless jigsaw, but I'm currently renovating my house and forgot it there. So instead I'm cutting them out with my benchtop bandsaw. With the platforms ready to go, I'm drilling out some pocket holes on the frame that I'll be using to mount the tops later. Alrighty, we've got our sweet black paint job and all of our tops cut out. But before we get these mounted up, we're gonna get our wheels on here. That way we don't scuff up our top while it's upside down. So what we're gonna be doing is we're mounting up 4-inch caster wheels just like usual. I like 4 inches over 2 inches because they roll a lot better than those smaller wheels. They go over anything that you find on a shop floor, and that's why I really like them. These are the best deal I've found, and they work really well, so I'll have them linked down below in the description so you can check them out. Now, let's get these mounted up. I'm mounting the wheels on using 3/8 by 1 inch lag screws and then taking them to final torque by hand so they don't strip out. Finally, it's time to mount the tops using 1¼ inch pocket screws. Alrighty, we've got our platforms all mounted up, so our main table is done and it's looking really good. So we're moving on to our fold-out rollers. So I've intentionally chosen these rollers because they're the exact same height as the platform on our planer, which means when we go to mount up our wings, all of our top surfaces can just be flush, which makes it really easy. Now, while everything's still flat, we're gonna go ahead and mount up our folding brackets. I'm mounting these brackets with 3/4 inch screws, and to center them on the frame legs, I'm offsetting them from the edge by 7/8 of an inch. Using my Bear Mountain Builds universal spacers, it honestly makes the whole process super easy. So if you're interested and want to check them out, I'll have a link down in the video description. With the brackets attached, I'm mounting the fold-outs to the main table flush to the top using 2½ inch screws. One thing to make sure of is that both brackets are parallel, otherwise they will not be able to fully collapse. I'm using a right angle tool to reach these top screws. It's not required, but it does make it easier. Before the rollers and planer are mounted, it's time to make this thing pretty with some poly. I'm mounting the planer in the center of the table with 4 2½ inch screws. Finally, I'm mounting the rollers using 1-inch lag screws and double washers. With that, the expanding planer table is done. Alrighty, the fold-out planer table is done. Now this is perfect for you guys with a smaller shop. It is 2 feet by 3 feet when it's all folded down, so it fits in your corner really well. But when it's time to use it, it folds out to be a total of 8 feet long with 3 feet of infeed and 3 feet of outfeed. Now this is great for when you're running those 8-foot 2x4s through it, but when it comes time to put something bigger through it and you want to go 10-foot, 12-foot, 16-foot boards, it's also the same height as my modular workbenches, so you can run as long of a board through it as you want. Now, if you're interested in building this yourself, I do offer plans for this build that include a material section, cut plans, and full assembly instructions that make the whole process super simple, so you can check those out in the video description. If you're running this Dewalt planer, remember, I also offer these 2½ inch hose adapters that lock onto the planer using the factory locking system, and it makes it so easy to hook up your hose. No more are you gonna be like me, where I was duct taping my hose on here for years. Now, instead, it makes the process super simple. Now, as usual, hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future projects. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful at all, hit the like button for me. It helps me out a ton and I really do appreciate it. And if you have any comments on the build, I'm sure you guys do because you always have great comments, leave it down below. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.